Greetings, dear viewers. I'm Quill Quickcard, and welcome to Radical Dreamers, the first sequel to Chrono Trigger. It all began with a notebook my mother handed me. She told me she found it while cleaning out the closet. This old notebook, covered with mold, was a diary that belonged to my grandfather, who passed away years ago. It contained his distant memories. I wonder if you still remember how we first met and our many adventures. It all seemed like a dream. We ran like the wind during those warm summer days long ago. You were a piece of a star that fell from the sky. I can still relive the memories of those days long past, just by closing my eyes like so, and whispering your name into the desolate night. Kid. Kid. You can already see the shadows of the things that would become Chrono Cross, even just in that intro. Radical Dreamers was originally released only in Japan. It was a visual novel. Kid! Hey kid! Bit of a good-looking graphical novel for the time. It's actually got some moving graphics. Are you ready, kid? I know you're anxious, but stay on your toes. Yeah, likewise, mate. You mess up and I'm leaving you behind. Got that, Surge? That's probably Australian. Australia definitely exists in this world. This game is canonically. Come on, Major, let's go. That bastard Lynx is gonna get what he deserves. Say your prayers, not that it'll do you any good. This game is truly canonically the sequel to Chrono Trigger. It's not a perfect sequel, but it's its own thing. It's its own little interesting story built out of that universe, and I think that's really cool. Radical Dreamer, please stop constantly switching screens. I am trying to do an intro. There, okay. It should stay on this screen long enough to get out some stuff. This is a visual novel which covers the adventures of Surge, a kid, and a character named Magiel as they go and explore Keep. So, this game, Radical Dreamers, was included in the Chrono Cross remaster that came out, I guess, according to that copyright date, 2022. And it's really great that Radical Dreamers now has like an official Western release with an official. It's just great to have it. It's a fun little extra. And I'm going to go through Radical Dreamers just once. There are multiple endings to this game, and some of them go completely crazy and off the wall. I'm just going to play through it once, the main ending, before I move on to Chrono Cross's much more well-known sequel, Chrono Cross. So, let's do it. And, oh dear God, I guess I'm doing bad Australian. The old lady's tip-off was right on the money. The counterspell and the barrier around the outer walls could have done a real number on us. Kid's plain, unadorned braid flicked back and forth across her shoulders as she walked. We picked our way through the elaborate lattice of the manor's magic shields, moving in closer and closer to Lord Lynx's stronghold. There were 3 of us: Kid, Majel, and me. I guess it must have been 3 years already since I first met Kid. Back then, I was just a wandering musician, traveling wherever my feet would take me, and wherever a few tunes would pay for a warm bed. It was in the Outlands, in a town called Regiora, where we first ran across one another, and since then, she'd dragged me along on a whole bunch of adventures, and misadventures too, and yeah, you could kind of assume, just from already looking at this, that Majel is, in fact, Magus. It's not exactly subtle about it. Ah, Kid. She was a thief. And not just any thief. Just a few months shy of 17 and already renowned as one of the realm's greatest. What's more, she was achingly beautiful, stylish, a joy to be around, and a dab hand at campside cooking, or so she liked to claim. The truth was a little different. Those bandits with hearts of gold you've heard about in stories, the ones who steal from the rich and give to the poor, yeah, that wasn't Kid's style. She was short-tempered, prone to lying, bossy, and obsessed with money, and rarely did she care to listen to a single word anyone said to her. But she wasn't all bad. Probably. Maybe. Sometimes. She had her moments, anyway. I glanced over my shoulder to see a shadow hovering behind us, blending into the darkness like smoke. Majel, also known as Majel the Shade. He was Kid's partner, but even after 3 years, I still knew hardly anything about him. All I knew was that he was around 30 years old and not much of a talker, but he was one heck of a mage. I heard that he and Kid had started working together way before I met her. He always covered the top half of his face with a mask, and I'd never seen what he looked like underneath. He was a man so mysterious that it sometimes seemed like he was an interloper from another world. It wasn't like Kid was exactly big on the details about her past, but Majel, he might as well not have had one. And Kid didn't seem to know much about her partner in crime either. What kind of a man he was, what kind of life he'd lived before. Nothing. You might ask how exactly I wound up being a part of this merry band. Well, it's complicated. I guess you could say that life doesn't always turn out the way you think it will. Kid, who was heading up our little raiding party, suddenly stopped dead. "Look lively, boys, we got company." We glanced around warily as cold, cruel eyes emerged from the darkness. I heard a low growl. Dark shadows prowled through the night, surrounding us. A pack of wildcats. There must have been about 10 of them. A thrill of fear ran down my spine. Flustered, I pulled my knife from my belt. Kid calmly shifted into a fighting stance. "Watch yourselves. Don't reckon these buggers been treated for rabies." The wildcats snarled and growled as they slowly closed in on us, drawing the noose tighter and tighter. Their eyes glinted in the darkness like fireflies, and strings of eager spittle dripped wetly to the ground. Then one of them sent an almighty roar soaring to the moon, and the hunt was on. What was I going to do? Oh yeah, you hear that music? Think fast! Kid dived into the thick of the pack of wildcats and gave the largest of their number an almighty kick in the chump. I didn't select anything! The startled beast gave a yelp, and as it was sent flying. I turned to my right to see that a nearby wildcat was charging toward me, its head lowered menacingly. Panicked, I tried to make a last-second dodge, but I wasn't quite fast enough. Its claws scraped against my side as it rushed past me. I winced in pain for a moment, then turned to face my foe and readied myself. I struck at it wildly. I slashed at the nearby wildcat with my knife. The beast tried to leap clear, but I was already too close. I felt the blade make contact and was rewarded with a screech of pain. The wildcat jumped away, this time managing to put some space between us. It looked like I hadn't cut it very deeply. I stood my ground, changing my grip on the knife and waiting for another chance to attack. "Surge, behind you!" Panicked by Kid's warning, out. "Said, behind you!" I whirled wildly around and came face to face with a pair of eyes blazing like hellfire. I defended myself. There wasn't time to do anything but try to protect myself. In a moment of sheer desperation, I crossed my arms to guard my face. Instantly, I felt the wildcat's fangs sink into my exposed wrist. It had thrown itself bodily at me, bowling me over backwards. Ugh! My arm still in its powerful jaws, the wildcat pinned me to the ground and shook its head. I tried desperately to free myself, but it was clamped onto me like a bear trap, and there was no way of getting loose. The sound of fang on bone was sickening. But just then, the creature recoiled with a screech. Kid had buried her knife deep into its gut. She quickly capitalized on its terror by giving it an almighty kick. Free of the wildcat, I staggered to my feet, holding the throbbing wound on my arm. I was breathing heavily. The handle of my knife was slick with sweat, and I tightened my grip. With a kick like a bolt of lightning, Kid landed a clean hit on the flank of a nearby wildcat. It staggered before losing its footing, letting out a pathetic cry, but Kid had already moved in to finish it off. And then the roar of fire. A burning smell filled my nostrils, and next to me a shrill screech pierced the air. Magil's fire spell engulfed the head of a nearby wildcat. It fled, darting off into the darkness like an arrow. I scanned the area. Only moments ago, we had been surrounded, but now there wasn't a single wildcat left. Kid and Magil had either sent the rest off with their tails between their legs, or put paid to them once and for all. Ha! You're dreaming if you're gonna think... Oh, God, I almost went Scottish. You're dreaming if you think... Ah, okay, come on, boys. Ha! You're dreaming if you think a pack of flea-bitten muggies is gonna stop us, Lynx. Kid crossed her arms and flashed a triumphant grin. Meanwhile, I was panting heavily, and it felt like my legs were about to give out from under me. I collapsed to my knees, overwhelmed by what I'd just been through. Whew. I'd taken a few hits, but I was fine otherwise. A couple of scars to talk about later, maybe, but nothing that would stop me carrying on. Are you hurt? Magil looked down at me, his face expressionless as ever. No worries, Madge. I'll be fine. Oh, God, said Kid. No worries, mate. He'll be fine, said Kid, barging in to get a better look at me. It may be a whinging sook, but it'll take more than a few scratches to kill this one. She was nothing if not sympathetic. But she was right. This was no time to be bemoaning my lot. We hadn't even reached the manor yet. I dabbed at my wounds with a tincture-soaked cloth and wrapped them with bandages, then looked up at the other two. We're just getting started. We're just getting started, I grinned back, putting a brave face on things. That's what I like to hear, Kid cheerily announced from close quarters. But then her eyes turned cold, like the cool glow of the moon in the night sky. It's going to be a long night. I nodded, trying my hardest not to utterly lose myself in her pale blue eyes. All right, let's get this show back on the road. She turned away and marched off deeper into the trees, without looking behind me to see if me and Magil were following her. Magil, of course, was already right behind her, his unhurried gait making it seem as though nothing much had happened at all. I jumped back up to my feet to chase after them. I did. Really? Yawning? Come on, I'm not even 15 minutes into this recording. Stop yawning. I'd be in for even more trouble than I'd bargained for if I got separated from them. The dark forest inside the manor's perimeter seemed to go on forever, a labyrinth of trees and boulders. The manor itself loomed in the distance, glowering over the vast grounds, and hidden within was a veritable mountain of treasure, just waiting for us. Lord Lynx was the noble who ruled the remote territory of Regiora. He was also Kid's mortal enemy. We were there that night to steal a certain jewel he kept locked away in his most closely guarded vault, the Frozen Flame. The Frozen Flame was veiled in mystery. It was said to be imbued with an uncanny energy and possessed of a beauty and clarity that made it a priceless treasure. Countless thieves had tried to steal it, and not one of them had come close to succeeding. Nor had... oh, wait, really? Yawning again? Nor had any of them escaped the manor alive. And now it was our turn to try and sneak into this place of death. Led by a girl who had the ambition to make the impossible possible, a hunger for vengeance that drove her onward, and a desire for riches that could never be satisfied. As we pressed on through the tree-filled darkness, the shadows gave way at last, revealing the true extent of the vast mansion. Clearly I need more tea. Hey, finally, say your prayers, Lynx, 'cause we're coming for you. Keeping to the overgrowth and the shadow of the trees, we made our way around the manor walls in search of a means of entry. Eventually, we came to a terrace overlooking the garden. There was no sign of any guards nearby. The only thing surrounding the manor was an uncanny stillness. This will lead us straight into the west wing, just as well. Oh, no, this is not Kid. This will lead us straight into the west wing, just as well. We don't have any business in the rest of the manor tonight, said Majel, gazing up at the dark building towering over us in the night. All right, what we waiting for? With that, Kid made to vault over the railing of the terrace. Stop! Majel hissed sharply. Remember what we're here for. Our main target is the vault and the frozen flame within it. We focus on this above all else. Your vengeance is of secondary concern. Agreed? Glancing over her shoulder, Kid replied with a reluctant, Yeah, don't get your knickers in a twist. But if we happen to run into him, I'm gonna knock that drongo's block off, and neither you or anybody else is gonna stop me. I guess Kid was going to get her way whether we liked it or not. Let's go, boys. The night is young. She cleared the railing with a sprightly hop and vanished inside the manor, hopefully to practice her Australian accent, which was truly abominable. I glanced toward Majel and nodded in silence. We followed Kid's lead, and were soon inside Lord Lynx's lair. The darkness swallowed us whole. Okay, so Okay, so that's how I access a save, just by pressing that button. What do other buttons do? Anything noticeable? Okay, there's an auto. So I assume this just takes back. Whoop. Okay, that does not take you to a main menu. That just takes you straight to the game launcher. Good to know. Sorry, just kind of experimenting. Haven't done this before, and I need to understand what to do. Letrasor interdit. I don't know what that says. A corridor stretched off to the left and right from the terrace. It seemed equally dark and chilly in both directions. I will go down the left. We pressed on through the darkness, down corridors that turned and twisted snake-like this way and that. Everything around us was still and silent, and it felt strangely like we were being watched. We continued, creeping cautiously down the corridors. Kid moved proudly and stealthily like a cat stalking its prey, while in the shadows Medjol followed, gliding swiftly and silently like a sinister breeze. We pressed on in the embrace of the Weaver of Fate. Okay, can we, like... Is there some way to stop it from doing that? Okay, I really don't think there is. I'm just gonna have to... Like, I'm just gonna have to read fast because I'm never gonna know what is or isn't going to remain on the screen. Kid stopped in her tracks, her senses clearly tingling. Majel and I were right behind her, and immediately realized that something was very wrong. I mean, I guess anything that doesn't pop up that symbol means it's going to auto-scroll away. We could hear a faint whispering, as if a spell were being cast, and a faint light was emanating from a monster sitting crouched on the flagstones ahead. Ooh, a long, bony finger traced strange shapes on the tiles. A demon! I pulled out my knife and readied myself to confront it. I'm going to wait and see what it's doing. I watched the demon carefully, keeping a tight grip on my knife. Majel didn't waste a moment and let rip with a spell. A ball of flame slammed into the creature. I could smell the stench of burnt flesh. The demon's eyes reddened and it bared its fangs. Cursed whispers filled the air. It was casting a spell. Let's take a defensive stance. I jumped quickly backward and braced myself for the impact, and then I heard a horrid croaking all around me. I glanced around to see the walls daubed in lurid green. No, they weren't painted green. Toads! Kid jumped with surprise and horror. The walls were absolutely covered with toads, their green hides a mess of warts and red and yellow speckles. Bloody toads bloody everywhere! Her voice grew more and more desperate as her horror and revulsion mounted. One of the toads leapt off the wall toward her. No! Leave me alone! Stop! No! She'd been driven half mad by fear. The venomous-looking warts of the toads emitted an orange mist with a hissing sound. The mist was getting thicker and thicker, and my stomach began to turn. And then the darkness was set ablaze by Majel's fire magic. The fire spread and covered the floor, protecting us from the demon's illusions. With that, the toads vanished, and Kid's look of terror faded. Beyond the pool of fire, the demon was drawing more sigils in the air. A complex figure began to take shape. Ah! Kid and I yelped as we jumped back. The floor had started to melt, and it was hot. Hot like the bottom of a saucepan over a roaring flame. Thick beads of sweat started to trickle down my face. They dropped to the floor, where they sizzled and erupted into puffs of steam. "Mage, do something!" screamed Kid. The demon flapped its wings, conjuring up a strong wind that blew out the flames, and peppered us with countless tiny needles of ice. Majel quickly responded with another fire spell. Fresh flames spread out like a net. Magel's fire spell instantly melted the ice needles, reducing them to a light mist, and, still burning as hot as ever, the flames surged toward the demon. It howled as the net of flames engulfed it. Its flesh melted, and an acrid, burning smell filled the air. "Eesh! I thought me geese was cooked there for a minute." Kid realized she was dripping with sweat, and muttered a grumpy complaint. "Cool it with the fire spells, will ya?" The intense heat had drained me of my stamina, but after the way Kid had reacted to the toads, I was more worried about her than me. "You alright, Kid?" "What do you mean?" She was trying to act as if the toad incident had never happened, but I knew it had. To think she was frightened of something so silly, I stifled a laugh. "Well, that went well. Whew! I'd taken a few knocks, but I was all right. A scrape or two wouldn't stop me." "Maybe you ain't such a drongo after all. Just goes to show, any old widder can make something of themselves if they put their mind to it." Kid's eyes glinted with mischief. We took the corridor leading from the left-hand side of the terrace, eventually arriving at an intersection with some stairs. The path to the right led down the stairs. The path to the left was a dark side passage, and the main corridor continued straight onward. Okay. So we can go down the stairs, continued on, down the side passage. Let's try the side passage. We headed down the side passage. At the end of it, we came to an old, immaculately polished door. We are definitely going inside. Kid gently pushed the door ajar and peeked into the room. The next thing I knew, she'd slipped inside. Majel and I followed. "Looks like a study." The room was lit by the moonlight coming through the long, slender windows, slanting down in pale beams through the darkness. It was pretty big for a study, with an immaculate antique desk dominating the center. I love getting to hear these early versions of Chrono Cross music. There were rows of bookshelves lined with thick, dusty old tomes. The wall to the rear of the room was decorated with paintings, and shelves of vases and painted plates stood before it. They all seemed to be curios from foreign lands. Let's look at the paintings first. I stood in front of one particularly prominent painting on the wall and examined it closely in the pale moonlight that shone through the window. It was a watercolor of a landscape that could only have come from some feverish dream. Day, night, and all the seasons of the year merged into one in a world that seemed to be melting. I thought I could make out several faces among the chaos. In the midst of the madness sat a small black gem, a red flame serenely flickering within. What was this picture trying to convey? Had Lynx put it here himself? "What you looking at, Sid? Found something valuable?" Kid came over to where I was standing and picked up a porcelain plate from a nearby shelf. She weighed it in her hand, seemingly appraising its value. "Nice little piece, this. Yeah, must cost about enough to feed a family for a year." She paused. "Not that I give a rat's ass. After all, it ain't the plate's fault some idiot spent that much on it." An almost sheepish grin flickered across her lips. "We'll come back for it later." She gently put it back on the shelf. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. It wasn't a loud knock, but in the bottomless silence of the night, it might as well have been a thunderclap. Kid and I stood bolt upright and turned toward it. Majel, meanwhile, hid in the shadows, drifting away like smoke. Panicked, I whispered to Kid, let's get in the shadows. Quick, get behind the door. We kept our bodies low as we silently and swiftly made for the back of the door, where the shadows would keep us hidden. We pressed our backs to the wall and did our best to still our breathing. Slowly, the door opened. Flickering candlelight spread from the doorway with a warm glow. I held my breath, but it seemed that whoever it was didn't mean to come in. They simply stood there. Strange. I thought I heard something. But the lord of the manor is away, of course. Why would there be anyone in here? I have to get over my nerves. Everything was fine until we heard the news that Pori was on the move. The figure quietly closed the door, plunging the room back into darkness. The voice trailed off to a whisper. We remained motionless, keeping our ears pricked for any sign of an unwelcome return. All we heard were footsteps moving away. So, Pori has made its move. Majel emerged from the shadows, contemplating the news we'd overheard. Kid, if the rumors are true, we might well be about to find ourselves in a very difficult situation. This seemed to set her thinking too. Pori was a powerful nation that ruled the southern continent. I'd heard it was a prosperous land whose recent and sudden development had pushed it far ahead of its neighbors, which made me wonder, what would its inhabitants want here, out in the sticks? They couldn't be after the frozen flame too, could they? As valuable as it might be, a jewel was just a jewel in the grand scheme of things. I couldn't imagine it being an item of national interest. I mean, ultimately it was just a pretty rock, right? Let them do what they want. If everyone's busy playing soldiers, they won't be bothering us. Come on, we got things to do. She headed for the door. We left the room and made our way back down the side passage. We made our way back down the dark side passage leading from the study. Eventually, we arrived back at the intersection. Some stairs led downward, the corridor branched left and right, with the right branch leading back toward the terrace. And that is all I have time for today. There is still a lot more to be done, but I'm afraid that'll have to wait until the next one.